Good morning and welcome to the second day of the Green Party 2002 Nominating Convention and State Membership Meeting. We have a treat. On your seat you will find words to a song that was created by Joanne Beeman, our Charlevoix County Drain Commissioner. She's going to lead us in a rendition of that song as our opening for the morning. So everybody stand up and let's hope our voices carry out to those stragglers out there who still think it's time for breakfast.
Worked on. The other that we've worked on is one platform that was mentioned in here a little earlier that I'm going to touch on, but it's public funding of campaigns. We want to see campaign finance reform. And then I don't want to see a little of it, I want it massive. Now how do you do it? Do it with public financing. Okay? But also what we have worked on for 10 years is called a Meet the Candidate Night. We don't want to debate. Okay? Yes, I want questions. I'm sorry, you're not going to have time to get to me, though. Maybe. Okay? We have struggled for 10 years to organize and put on Meet the Candidate Nights. Finally, this year, 2 weeks ago, the Bay City Times, our local newspaper, and Charter Communications, our local cable company, combined to host, film, air, and produce a Meet the Candidate Night that every one of the Republicans came out for, two of the Democrats.
My name is Joe King. I'm running for County Commissioner in Charlevoix County. I've been at Green since April. That's when I joined. Joined mainly because the 10 key values pretty much follow my philosophy of life.
Get down all the way from the thumb. As it says in the paperwork, I'm a Reverend, Universal Life Church. I prefer to be called Reverend Happy instead of Reverend Wright because I don't want to be confused with the rock and roll band out of Flint, Reverend Right Time, first cousins of funk. I got involved in Green Party because of Michael Moore. I was chasing him around Michigan, trying to get him to attend the marijuana march I was organizing out in Flint. I never did get him to come, but I did listen to what he had to say. And he said all you had to do was try. The people out there are afraid to try. They really don't want to get involved, especially people like me running around with big pot leaves on their chests. Did I have good reason to be afraid? They killed a couple friends of mine down in Rainbow Farm, Tom and Raleigh. As a little tribute to them. They tried to get involved and tried to change the laws, but they ended up giving their lives. Maybe they should have run for office instead of passing a petition, but that's all said and done now. But they were trying to legalize marijuana and legalize hemp. I think it should be a big focus of the Green Party, that there's a lot to be done in the hemp industry, a lot of money to be made, and a lot that's not being given to our farmers right now. But about 30 miles away from my home in Ubley, there's a place they're making a diesel out of soybeans. Soybean diesel. How funny, 85% cleaner than regular diesel. And all the money doesn't go to Arabia. It goes into the farmers' pockets. They could be making money off of transportation. I actually got a bike, an electric motorcycle. It's called a hybrid. It runs off of vegetable oil diesel as well. It gets 150 miles to a gallon. It's $7,000 and just about nothing on gas. That we could be using these vehicles right now if we had some common sense in our policy. And that's what I'd like to run as, is a common sense candidate with uncommon sense. There's things that I'm saying that everybody understands. That
I'm Brendan Jones. I'm running for a state representative in the 41st district.
Which is where?
Troy and Clawson. Okay. I guess standard Green platform. However, it is a very major Republican district. So one of the things that I'm trying to push for is to maybe help the Republicans understand that if they keep electing, the people that they are electing, corporate regulation is not going to have any meaningful reforms as far as legislation is concerned. Beyond that, I would have to say that I'm in favor of quarterly district meetings, which would be every 3 months. People from the district would come together, whether it be in a Knights of Columbus Hall or something bigger, I do not know, depending on how much interest there is initially. But I'm hoping that it would be a good way to turn people on to government and bring people in, show them the House bills that will be voted on within the next 3 months, ask their opinions personally, get a round going, discuss the legislation, and come to some sort of consensus about what should be passed. Hopefully, this would give them both a stake in government, turn them on to it, hopefully, encourage that they bring their children, and at the same time...
My name's Art Myatt. I'm running for state representative in the 27th district, which is Hazel Park, Ferndale, Oak Park, Berkeley, and Huntington Woods, and Pleasant Ridge, the tiny little village that I lived in that's enclosed by Ferndale. Let me do a little personal history first. I'm a Vietnam veteran. In the early 60s, I was protesting the war. In the late 60s, I got drafted and sent to Vietnam. When I got out of there, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with politics of any sort because I didn't think the results were very good. So, been working as a manufacturing engineer. 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, I was one of a little group of people that was passing around a few square inches of solar panels or solar cells that were made out of amorphous silicon. They were 5% efficient, which was hardly usable, and it was a few square inches that cost $1 million of research to produce. We've improved a little bit since then. I'm now working on a manufacturing plant that produces solar cells about a foot wide when they're finished. They're actually 14 inches wide as manufactured. And it produces them at the rate of 3 miles a day. So it's a 30 megawatt manufacturing facility. But if you read the editorial in AWOG, my wife and I jointly wrote the editorial, and it explains a little bit about why personally we changed our minds about avoiding politics and getting involved in it. It has to do with our son, who was 10 years old, dying of leukemia, and in the course of that I realized that I was totally infuriated at the hodgepodge mess that passes for a health insurance system in this country.
Yes.
And then on a little more reflection, I realized that basically he was killed by pollution. Some of it.
I'm a resident of Detroit, and I'm running for a state representative in the new 10th district, which is pretty much the entire west side of Detroit. Pretty much from Southfield Freeway over to the Dearborn border, down, or the Redford border down to Dearborn Ford Road. It's a large district because it includes one of the largest parks in Detroit, Rouge River Park, Rouge Park. The Rouge River runs through the center of it, so I believe that Rouge River issues will be an important part of my campaign. There's, as you may or may not know, there's some civil liberties issues that have been raised in conjunction with the park, harassment of gay men in the park, some
Dearborn itself. I know it's been more of an issue in the southwest side, but definitely that would be something I would oppose strongly.
Sharon?
Yeah, I'm wondering why there's no opposition to the Republican in Dearborn. Are the Arabs Republican?
No. No, definitely not. Yeah, it's a weird situation. The Democrat. I mean, there are some Republican. Spence Abraham, but. For the most part, no. In the Democrats, this is not a mostly Republican area. Last time the Democrat ran, he did not get creamed. He got a high percentage of the vote. The reasoning, I actually spoke to the wife of the candidate who dropped out, and it just sounded like personal issues. I think they just dropped the ball on this, and the Arab community has no love for the Republican Party. There's definitely no love for George Bush. And so and actually there's in some districts of Dearborn, Nader got almost 10% of the vote. And so there's definitely, I think there's going to be some residual Green Party influence there. So.
To Adriana and George Corsetti, if he's here, salute, okay? Okay. About 3 weeks ago, I attended a political forum of sorts with Michigan WAG newspaper writer Bill Ballinger. And he described the race in my district between the incumbent Democrat and former mayor of my hometown, Patricia Lockwood, and the former representative and current 5th Genesee County District Commissioner, Dave Robertson. And he described it as a race where you want a moderate Democrat running and you want a conservative Republican running because you don't want a left-wing Che Guevara wacko type up there.
Sounds like a challenge to me.
Well, sir. Well, when the questioning came up at the end, and he dredged through all the old people, there were a lot of old folks, no offense to any of you in here. I was about the youngest one there. I raised my hand and he enthusiastically, oh, a new question here. And he says, what's your question? I said, well, Bill, as a left-wing Che Guevara radical type, needless to say, I don't expect to appear in Inside Michigan Politics anytime soon or on Skubik's show. So, yeah. But anyway, like Paul introduced me, I'm Pete Ponzetti III. I live in Fenton, Michigan, southern Genesee County, and I'm running for 51st District State Representative, which includes Grand Blanc, City of Fenton, Linden, Argentine, Mundy Township, Grand Blanc Township, and so on. And like I said, running against
about specifically improving like the physical plant of the schools.
Yes, I can say from personal experience. I went to school in Pontiac, at a school in Pontiac, and I was in math class one day, and a piece of the ceiling fell down because it was raining so hard. School buildings are too old, and condition that you told me, the legal condition, is news to me, but I could believe it. We need new schools, and not just in the richer districts. Like I just moved to Rochester, revamped every single one of their schools. But since the day I was born, the same schools that I went to in Pontiac are still falling apart, and that needs to change.
Sharon?
Yeah, I was saying, I think that we could make an interesting team. Because,
I was asked about 2 months ago to join the Greens by John Lytle, who's a member of another group I belong to, the Alliance for Democracy. And and then he begged me to run for office. So I started out as a teacher in the 60s, which was a really exciting time in Detroit to be a teacher. There were a lot of things that made it exciting. One, you can't hear me? Okay. One is that there were a lot of really idealistic, creative teachers in the school at that time who were allowed at that time to be creative, as opposed to what's happening right now, I believe. The Model Cities project was going on then, where Detroit was named a model city, and there was a lot of money brought into the city to put into education, to see what it is that really gets children to learn how to read. Well, they found out the answer to that. The answer was small classes and lots of books. And it worked. So you know what they did? They stopped it. So when you hear people talking about trying to study about what's going to make children learn, it's already been found out. It's just, do we have the will to put it into effect? And the will means money. And that's something that's never been put into education. There's a lot of people who talk about it, have politicians who have their pictures taken in a schoolroom with a lot of little children reading a book, and oh, isn't that sweet? But those same politicians don't want to put money into that. They want to put money into missiles. They want to put money into things that have nothing to do with education at all.
Yeah, I'm Frederick Kline. I've run before for office, and we have a little slogan: elect Frederick Kline, who stops education decline. Okay, I am 72, might not look that old. I get a pension from the schools. but I keep up with hundreds of my students that I taught over almost 50 years ago. So a lot of them have many grandkids in the schools. Some, of course, did become world famous because I taught at that time, mostly it was considered about the roughest place in this country per cubic foot. The reason I say cubic foot, we only had about 5 high-rise buildings that Robert Taylor owns in Chicago had about 20. It's called the Brewster Douglas Projects of Detroit. And a lot of folks, I don't care, black, white, whatever, they didn't want to go down there because I remember when Charles Diggs, who I think was about the first black elected to Congress from Michigan, spoke at our graduation, 8th graders in 58. He said, oh, the teachers here felt they were being sent to Siberia. Well, we were incensed. I asked to go down there because I worked for the recreation department where Joe Louis trained and the Harlem Globetrotters played. So we had respect. That is the biggest thing that's missing today from these schools, respect.
If elected to the University Board of Regents, my #1 priority will be to keep corporate advertising out of Michigan Stadium. Currently, the University of Michigan Athletic Department is considering building a number of new facilities as part of its Master Facilities Program. However, it does not yet have funding for many of these projects and is looking for ways to increase its revenue. One option for revenue enhancement would be to allow corporate advertising in the football stadium. But I tell you today that right now, we as Michigan residents need to unite and say no to corporate logos and advertising in our stadium before it is too late. We want to preserve the prestige and tradition of the University of Michigan. We want a stadium that symbolizes the best public university in the country, a stadium that represents the tradition and excellence embodied in more than a century's worth of great football teams. We do not want corporate logos detracting from our school.
Good morning. Morning. I think I'll start off with a little background. I was born and raised in Petoskey, Michigan, and attended public schools until my senior year when I went to Interlochen Arts Academy, where I graduated. And for the last 3 years, I've been a volunteer, coordinator, and staff member of the Bliss Fest Music Organization, which is a nonprofit devoted to education and the preservation of folk music and folk art. I've participated in the A20 March to End the War in Washington, D.C., and have been active against the Perrier plant, Ice Mountain, joining the protests in Stanwood, Michigan. Been active in my local chapter of Campus Greens in Ann Arbor. Spent a week in Chicago volunteering at the National Campus Greens office and underwent training there. And I'm currently enrolled in the University of Michigan, both the School of Art and Design and Literature, Science, and the Arts. I'm a sophomore this year. And biggest part of my campaign will probably be the decorporatization of campus. From 1975 to 1999, while enrollment has dramatically increased, the amount of tenure-track professors has decreased 10%, while the number of graduate student instructors has increased 40%. So what this means is there's more and more classes that are just being taught by graduate students. And I don't think that it's worth the compromise. GSIs are paid 1/10 the amount of professors despite the work they do. And just recently, the Board of Regents passed in 6-1 a new budget, which includes a 7.9% raise in tuition. So thanks to Matt over there, he's gotten me a new copy of the university budget, which is a perfect example in itself of the university's waste of money. I mean, do you really think they need, this glossy paper? And so I'm going to go what we can change to better spend the money and not need 7.9% tuition.
Something I would greatly enjoy doing. So, and And then just real quick, since I only have a couple more minutes left, just want to talk a little about some of the issues that I'm interested in looking at. Of course, tuition increases. I know that's something many state universities are looking at. The big thing that I would like to concentrate on is maybe we can look internally, maybe eliminate a few managerial positions maybe that aren't necessary. Cut some bureaucratic fat instead of having the burden placed on students disproportionately. Parking is another issue in East Lansing. Increasingly, more and more ramps are being built, fewer and fewer spots on the side of the streets. Students are very frustrated over this, so I would also like to support more free or more creation of parking. Obviously, within certain limits, we don't want to tear down more wildlife or what had to create that. Also, if I were to be elected, assuming I receive the nomination and I was elected as a board of trustees, I will promise you right here and now, I will not do everything in my power to block John Engler from being president of Michigan State. John, you're not going to steal my sandwiches. Also, I will plan on supporting as much as possible the graduate union, which won tremendous concessions because, as we know, they're paid very little and they're increasingly doing the workload of what professors should be doing. So I will also support them.
My suitability for candidacy, I'll be very brief. Otherwise, a long-winded speech. I have to avoid that. I have been at the university for 42 years. In all possible capacities. I came from India in 1960 as a graduate student, and I have been a student. I have been a teaching assistant as a graduate student, and then faculty member, and I was in administration too. I was chairperson of a very large department, humanities, and I was on almost, many committees on all levels of the university. And I know the university from the inside very well. And the reason I accept this candidacy is, this nomination is, that I've always felt that the university has become more of an administrative complex. University basically should be, some of you may not agree with me, I don't know if my wife will agree with me. University basically is faculty. University should be faculty. Students come and study and they leave, they keep some context, but the heart of the university is and should be faculty. What has happened is it has become administration.
Let me say that the 4th Congressional District, which covers Saginaw, Mount Pleasant, and meanders up through the state on up into Traverse City. I've not traveled the whole district myself. I've been to Traverse City a few times to talk with the Board of State grades. Most of my campaign staff are the students, and they're running our campaign, and so the campaign is about we, not me. On September 11th, I got a phone call, and then they asked me to look at the tragedy that was taking place, the crime that was taking place, the declaration of war that was taking place. And I asked myself, why is this happening to us? Why are the American people being asked to pay for the sins and the crimes of our leadership, our corporate political leadership? I know that we used to have the best government on the face of the planet, and we sold it. And so now I joined the Greens because I think we can get it back. Corporate America has always been green, and it's about time we caught up with them. I've been following Ralph Nader since the days of the chemical feast, which attacked the Food and Drug Administration and talked about how the regulated have been taken over by the regulators have been taken over by the regulated. The Interstate Commerce Commission, which speaks to our horrible transportation system, while we're a third world country in terms of mass transit, and the book on of course, the Corvair, unsafe at any speed. So I've always been green, philosophically. These issues, ecological wisdom, we really have to put this on the agenda. There's no way that our current leaders are going to discuss ecological wisdom. They have been bought and paid for by the very corporations. Yep. And it's impossible to ask them. It doesn't make sense for us to ask for reform from the present one-party system that we have disguised as two, or masquerading as two. This makes no sense whatsoever. They've been bought and paid for. It's not their fault. I mean, I'm running against Dave Camp, but Dave Camp is just part of a process, of a corrupt process. He's a victim of that very same process as are the people we're running against. And so we have to present an alternative to the American people. This whole notion of social justice, well, that's not going to be on the agenda. One of the reasons I'm running is these things don't make the agenda. I teach international relations, American foreign policy, international law, African politics, and African American politics. None of these issues will make the agenda. You saw during the last debate, foreign policy was not discussed. We're about to be dragged into a war so that the same people, Enron, Halliburton, Harkin, so that these same corporate criminals can drag us into a war to increase their profits, to keep the Asians, to keep the Iraq, Iran, Russia, and China from messing with this pipeline. And we're starting a war so we can have access to oil. Here we are, 5% of the global population. We're consuming 60% of the world's oil, and we want more, and we wonder why the world is angry at us. We got to start thinking about this.
Speaking in front of these microphones here.
Point it right at your mouth.
Okay. Genesee County, Tuscola County, and parts of Saginaw and Bay County make up the 5th Congressional District.
Where is that?
That is right here.
Okay.
Until recently, I've been working for the state of Michigan. I recently retired. Now, I've been interested in politics all of my life, or all of my adult life, or since I was in junior high, really. But I haven't really been active. Well, I knew I was going to retire starting in January, so I started to think, well, I'm not going to just retire and fade away and play golf all summer and all, ski or do whatever in the winter. I really want to do something for people. So I thought I might want to work for Bonnier, and I contacted him, and then I saw Ken's website with the Flint Greens. And I said, well, I'll go visit one of them, or one of their meetings. And I went to the Green Party meeting in Genesee County, and I found, here's a group of people that think pretty much exactly like I do. I read the 10 key values, and really, those are what I'm all about. That's what I've been all about all my life. I mean, I have basically voted Democratic, practically never for Republican, but I've also voted for a lot of third-party candidates. We really, in this country, do not have a true democracy because we don't have all points of view expressed. And I really want to see other points of view expressed. I want us to be the ones that force the Democrats and force the Republicans to really start talking about issues. It really sickens me to see the campaigns that are taking place right now, where nobody really discusses issues. All they do is talk about, or no, they don't talk about anything. They just put on these pretty campaigns that I'm a straight shooter, or I'm a sweet little person that you haven't met. I mean, this is not what politics is all about. We're supposed to be talking about how are we going to make our corporations responsible. I worked for 24 years in Flint, Michigan. That city was the birthplace of General Motors. And General Motors for years has been the biggest corporation in the world. Flint, Michigan should be the best city in the country to live in. Yet it's a dump, really. The houses are falling apart, the downtown, there's no businesses there anymore, except for the courthouses and the Family Independence Agency where I work, there's practically nothing there. Oh.
Work that out. I thought I was being real clever. The 11th Congressional District is a newly created district. It basically goes through the western suburbs of Wayne County up into the western half of Oakland County. So you include everything from basically Belleville through Canton up through White Lake area. For the Republicans, but it's only 54% Republican. Only 51% of the people in the district voted for George Bush, of the people that showed up to vote anyways. There are no significant incumbent Democrats and there's only one significant incumbent Republican. His name is Thaddeus McCotter, and the 11th district was made for him. So why? Thaddeus McCotter is the person in Congress, or in the state Senate, who killed the bill that would have stopped the 40% raises for our state senators and reps. It went to his committee, and I don't want to give you a civics lesson. I teach government, so I tend to ramble through this, but you have to vote no, that you don't want the raise. And the House of Reps voted no. It went to the Senate, and he was in charge of the committee that killed it, so the senators didn't even have to vote on it. So yes, the 11th district is his reward. However, it is a district we could win because he's not very popular because of this issue. I decided to run for Congress after watching business as usual in government. I've watched the corporate scandals, the environmental destruction, and the plight of the poor and the elderly in this country. And we need, and it's been a year, obviously, of corporate profits, as usual, over the well-being of American citizens. I decided to seek the Green Party nomination after Michael Moore's last book. I'm sure many of you have read it. You see, I always consider myself a liberal Democrat. I voted Democrat. I've donated to the Democrats. I've worked for their candidates. But that causes you to look the other way on a lot of issues. And you've got to look the other way when Clinton invades and bombs countries to help his public approval. You have to ignore the fact that they can't seem to get health care fixed, prescription drugs even fixed. You have to watch as I think it was a week ago, the Congress is working, the senators are working on a possible way to punish corporate criminals. And that evening, they went out and had a fundraiser thrown by 88, I believe it was 88 of the top corporations. I think the final straw was when Kenneth Lay went before the public and said, you know, we're suffering as much as these workers. We had to sell one of our homes. I believe that was actually his wife who said that. So what do I stand for? If elected, I am a high school teacher. I would, obviously public schools and rebuilding the inner city schools is very high on my priority list. I believe the federal government has to have a larger hand in attracting people to the profession of teaching. And I gotta go faster. The class size needs to be reduced. I think the largest problem is actually the class size issue. And you can't fix these problems with these like vouchers. Vouchers to me is like if you take a flower and you give it a thimbleful of water every day and the flower starts to die. You look at the flower and you say, hey, you either use that water better or I'm giving it to another flower. I want to streamline veterans benefits. Right now there's a law in the books that says if you're a veteran and you're disabled, you don't receive your full pension. It basically, your disability replaces your pension, so you get one or the other. I think that obviously needs to be thrown out. I want to defend the environment. Corporate polluters need to go to jail. My pet issue in the environment is to ban the use of MTBE, which is the gasoline additive, which is making our water undrinkable. Some expect 100 million people's water will be affected within 10 years, and it's impossible to get this out of the groundwater. Health care to all Americans and prescription drug coverage to seniors is a minimum. I have my father-in-law is 54 and is on a fixed income and already he pays $120 in prescription drugs. Actually, he gets together with a group and they go to Canada to buy their prescription drugs. And this is only going to get worse as the years go on. I would like to see incentives for companies to actually go after prescription drugs, to develop drugs to cure AIDS around the world, to cure malaria. They need to have incentives to do things like that. And I guess that's it. So I'm asking you to send me to Washington Nation. Thank you.
Greens, fellow Greens from all over. Nice to see Michigan so strongly represented. I apologize for being late and again having to leave early. I have to speak at my mother's memorial service very shortly in Rose Point, of all places. I am a longtime Detroiter and a lifelong Green, I can say. I was active in the Greens from way back. In fact, I was just getting my son who's in Germany. I've got a son who's going to be a senior at Yale, where I was at his age, and another who's going to be a senior at the U of M. My one who is in Germany, though, is going to go see an old friend called Daniel Cohn-Bendit, who, as many of us know, is on the European. Great, yes. We stand tall in the Greens, but still learning how to deliver. I've actually run for Congress a couple of times, but I wanted to run on the Green ticket originally in 1980 for Lucien Nedzi. I used to lobby one of our more liberal congresspeople from the 14th district that I'm looking to do again, since I want to make sure nobody else was there. I'm in the 14th. I'd be happy to run for any district. My commitment is, those of us I see shaking their heads who've seen me in many venues, is just to getting the Green message out. And he's just pointed out that Kwame's mommy has a weak position on, certainly in the Middle East, and I do have a whole plan, which would be probably too long to get into, but for a Palestinian extended homeland, given that we're caught between a rock and a hard place and going to go in any case. Bush was actually at Yale when I went there. Couldn't get him to come to a anti-Vietnam event, and trying to use some common friends credentials actually get him in there. Bill and Hillary were finishing up by the time I finished up. I dropped out a couple of times to go abroad and got even more radicalized. I actually went to that elitist institution of which I can't draw much pride, given that it not only are slightly deficient president. He was born in New Haven when his dad was there, but also Cheney, and a top lawyer, John Ashcroft, who's supposed to be enforcing natural law, but yeah, gag us with a spoon. So do our civil rights, and all the more reason Green values need to be asserted. Every one of the 10 key values I know we agree on, but to me, especially those of feminism and grassroots democracy, and what we really need to do to get our whole message out, I think, is to seize every opportunity. And I still, even this last minute, was trying to get people like Andrea Jarro, who's the starter of the Red Panthers, to come up. We've been speaking about a red-green-blue alliance, because there are so many to come in. I'm glad to see heads nodding. I actually was one of the, in a sense, the instigators of the National Law Party, which was the last I ran on against David Bonner, but we got to be good friends over half a decade ago. But basically, Maharishi fired me. I was translating for him in Switzerland for pushing him to get political back in January '68, that was. Before I joined up at the Living Theater, went back to Yale and got helped radicalize the place a little bit. But I was wanting to fire him back. Good, 2 minutes, that's fair. Now the National Law Party has been abandoned and he took himself out. That's the kind of group we should bring into the Green.
Run against Carl. As a matter of fact, I have some stuff here on Mr. Carl Levin. So far, he's raised $3,460,000 to run against our candidate. So he's ready. Well, we hope it doesn't no good. And if you look at the things that these guys, the way they collect their money, it looks like a mutual fund for all the big corporations. And the 1% of the population that controls our parties. And I could sell my house, mortgage it, come up with maybe $300,000 if I put all kinds of loans out. And all that would do was say, uh-oh, we're in trouble. We need to raise, $5 million to run against you. And the money would be there. So you really come down to issues and getting your word out. There's a phrase I heard, become the media. That is an excellent idea. If everybody here became the media, that would make a big difference. It takes a little effort. It takes some phone calls. It takes some videotape. It takes some imagination sometimes, but that would expand what we have to say a lot wider. And I would hope more people, I know a lot of people in the state, we have people in Kalamazoo doing it, we have people in Lansing, Ray's done shows, and the more we do that around the state, the more we are committed to persevere and go sustain what we're doing, the more we'll become credible in the media's eyes, and the more they'll show up at events like this and take us very, very seriously. Especially when we start deciding elections, and we could decide them this time. Some of the other issues, free airtime, something I've been involved with. We did shows on that. There are efforts underway by many, many groups in this country right now to provide free airtime, change the law, to get our airwaves. We gave them away free in '96 in the Communications Act for nothing. Trillions of dollars could have went in our coffers from the communication industry, but this collusion between the major parties and the broadcast industry, it's all paid off. All that money, $3 to $4 billion that they'll raise this time, That's all going pretty much into the pockets of the media. So they don't see the people who don't pay them. Some of these other ones, equal education. I'd like to see us guarantee free education for all our citizens, from preschool all the way to PhD. We can have a public system. We base our money on all these other projects, this feudal military efforts and so on. I will say that I'm pro-choice. I defend a woman's right to choose, and there's no qualification other than that I will do whatever I can to preserve that right for women. And I would like to propose new Tupper-Calf state standards. I am not in the politics. I want to do what's right. We need to end the war on drugs. We need to shut down Yucca Mountain. We need to capitalize our public power so we can reduce our phone bills and utility bills. And I'd like to see fair trade, not free trade, and real universal health care, not this phony prescription stuff. We need social equity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Donnelly Haddon. You can find my literature on the table in the back. It tells more about me than you probably need to know. I haven't been in the Green Party but a couple of years. I've been doing green work since the 1960s. I'm an attorney. I do environmentalist law. That's what I do. And I sue polluters. That's what we do in my office. We sue polluters for fun and profit. And I've been doing this since my first air pollution case against the Bud Company foundry on the east side of Detroit, which was tried in 1970 in Wayne County Circuit Court. I've been doing that ever since. We sue air polluters, we sue water polluters, we sue people who put sewage into your basements, sewage intrusions, we sue landfills, we sue people who leave leaking underground storage tanks behind when they close their gas stations. All of that stuff. I've been doing it a long time. About 2 years ago, I had a law clerk work in my office one summer. His name was Jim Nicita. Some of you know him. He was your candidate, the Green candidate for Wayne State Board of Governors a couple of years ago. Jim says to me one day, Donnelly, he says, you're a Green. You've been doing green work for 30 years. You agree with all the philosophies of the Green Party. Why don't you belong to the Green Party? I said, I don't know. Why don't I? So he signed me up. And unfortunately, last year there was no election, so they tapped me for some money instead. And so I contributed a couple of $1,000s to the party coffers to help you through that. I get a bigger cheer for that than I get for running for office. Anyway, somebody said, yeah, you were at the time. That's why, anyway, so Jim called me again. He's out in Oregon, as you know, but he called me or emailed me a couple of months ago and said, why don't you run for Michigan Supreme Court if the Green Party will nominate you? Well, I looked at the Michigan Supreme Court. There are 2 seats open in November, 2 justices who are running for re-election. It's an 8-year term. The 2 who are running for re-election are Robert Taylor and Elizabeth Weaver. Both of these people, somebody's throwing up over there. Anyway, these two justices were appointed to the court originally by Governor Engler. They're both ultra-conservatives. As you know, the Michigan Supreme Court, there's 7 justices on that court. 5 of them got there through the Republican Party, and it's not just the Republican Party, it's the conservative wing of the Republican Party that they belong to. And the decisions that have been coming out of the Michigan Supreme Court have been horrendous. And they're both, of course, going to be running as incumbents, and they'll have a little designation, Justice of the Supreme Court, under their name. But the parties nominate the candidates, but we do not run as candidates with a party label. So we appear on the ballot as nonpartisan. Now, all those who are in the know politically know who the Republican candidates are and who the Democrats have nominated, and they'll know who you nominate. But the public out there at large may not know that. And it's an opportunity to slip a Green into office because they won't know whether they're voting for a Republican, a Democrat, a Green, or who. With the right campaigning, and if we can get people to turn off the incumbency label, we can get them in the mood where they want to throw out those rascals that are in there, then it becomes open for the other candidates to move in and take over. I predict what's going to happen is that the Michigan trial lawyers are going to be backing the Democrat nominees probably. It's going to be a bitter, dirty, mudslinging battle. And somebody who gets in there and can rise a little bit above the plane of this battle and get his name out has a good chance of getting in. And I hope that to be me, if you agree.
Consumer protection laws, has attacked trial attorneys personally, has politicized the Supreme Court, has engaged in ad hoc attacks against attorneys, has turned the power of the executive office against attorneys who stood up to fight the good fight. I've dedicated my entire professional career to representing people who have been placed in very unpopular positions because of government abuse, corporate abuse, and criminal actions taken against them. I dedicate my life, the very blood of my being, to stand up against environmental polluters, people who have taken the watershed, like Perrier, people who are taking the very blood out of our state, the so-called smokestack polluters, people allowing, such as Governor Engler, Canada, to dump its toxic waste and pollution and turn Michigan into a giant cesspool for the international community. I say it's time we have an Attorney General to stand up, be independent on behalf of the citizens of this state. To the dying breath, I will fight the good fight on behalf of each and every one of you. God bless America. Thank you. My name is Jerry Kaufman, and I am running to be your candidate, the people's advocate for Attorney General. God bless you.
Appreciate being here, and things have got a little rambunctious since lunch. The motivational speakers sort of ebbed away. We had a lot of controversy, which is healthy and which is good. I just want to take advantage right now to thank all the candidates, all the people that are here, the new Greens, the old Greens, the non-Greens, the volunteers, everybody connected. I think this is turning out to be an outstanding meeting. It's just surprising me, and I've been around for quite a while, as you know. Basically, the Secretary of State is the chief voting official of the state of Michigan, in charge of the Campaign Finance Act, in charge of the local clerks during a general election, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You've got two main duties for the Secretary of State. Most people, outside the Greens and outside the hardcore political types, think the Secretary of State operates the offices. The Secretary of State office, where you renew your license plates and things like that. This is true. But they're also the chief voting official. We found out about the Secretary of State and his or her powers with Catherine Harris from Florida in the year 2000. And she has just had to resign if you check today's paper. She violated her own law. She goofed by not retiring, or she retired or without at the same time. So she had to resign in order to run for U.S. Rep, Republican-controlled district in Florida. Interesting. Newspaper today. The world is interesting, isn't it, folks? One page in the, by the way, Lansing State Journal announced a convention today. Stacy Range. They've had it for about 10 days. Like investing your money? When? When? Is it going to be tomorrow? No. Is it going to be for this election? No. Part of it can be for 2004. We don't know. Because any community, any locality, any small district can institute IRV tomorrow, voting tomorrow. Any school can institute IRV tomorrow. I'd like to see Tom Bartley here, who's a new volunteer. By the way, an ex-cop running for supporting the Greens. I'm ex-military, Air Force officer, 4.5 years. You're running as a Green? Get back into it. The Greens are increasing. They're getting more legitimate. The press in Michigan You can ask Mr. Pluta if you'd like to step forward, but I don't think he'll say anything. Rick Pluta from Michigan Radio is here. If you listen to KAR, if you read the newspapers, if you listen to the politicians, the Greens, the word Greens are being mentioned more and more every day and every week. This is a first step, this is a start, this is where we keep on going.
I wasn't at all expecting to do this, even though Doug had approached me before, so I don't have anything prepared, and I'm going to talk off the top of my head. There are so very many issues that are important in Michigan that are particular to Michigan, you know, less general than issues applicable all over the country or all over the world. So I'll try to focus on those. There's, right now, because of what happened September 11th, there are a lot of civil rights and civil liberties issues that are very important that Greens all over the country and in Michigan have been working for. There are, for example, the current Attorney General Jennifer Granholm, who is also a governor. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Governor candidate helped to actually write sort of the Michigan version of the Patriot Act that sharply curbs civil liberties for people in Michigan. And I think we have to definitely address that in any sort of campaign we do, whether or not I'm involved in it. But I think that's a key issue for me. Also, because of the large Arab American population in Michigan, we definitely have to continue to combat ethnic and racial profiling, and not just of Arabs, of course, of all minorities, blacks in particular, which has been something that I've been working on in Ann Arbor. I'm the only person on the racial profiling committee in the Huron Valley Greens, and we had a forum about that that was very successful. I like Doug's signature issue of the 100 megawatt green power plant. Is it wind power? Yeah. And that's definitely doable. The Nation published an article in which they proposed or supported the idea that actually we could provide enough power to the entire United States through green means. We don't actually need to use coal and oil, and definitely don't need to use nuclear power to provide our energy needs. So that's another big thing.
We got any Viagra?
We'll hear your stomach.
There you go.
All right. I'm Douglas Campbell. I'm running for governor of Michigan. I am a member of the Green Party of Michigan. I'm also a member of the Green Party of the United States. I'm a residual member of the Greens Green Party USA, and I'm an affiliate member of the Green Parties of Illinois and South Africa. I am by profession a registered professional engineer. I've been doing the work for about 20 years. I've been registered now for about 6. Been on a lot of interesting projects, including a couple of green projects, one of which was a solar-powered race car. One of which is Chrysler's zero-emission electric minivan, which was canceled, and so was I, by the Daimler takeover of 1999, 98, I forget, it's been a while. I've also been on a couple of neutral projects like aircraft instrumentation and tomography, and on some definitely non-green projects like nuclear power. Yes, I have been a nuclear engineer. I've also been a Republican, which you can see in my campaign literature. That's not it. Too many pockets. I was a Republican activist in Chicago in the 70s and early 80s. which may sound strange to be a Green now, but in Chicago they have kind of a topsy-turvy political system where the Republicans are actually the loyal opposition, at least until they get a toehold, which they still haven't, and may never. I fell out of electoral activity in about 1982 or so, and I switched over to working on direct action, worked with organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union, the National Abortion and Reproductive Rights Action League, the Computer Professionals for Social Responsibility, which started out life opposing Star Wars, but evolved into some other issues, including digital privacy, things like that. Fell out of activism entirely. I never stopped voting, but I was beginning to sympathize with the people who had. And then in 2000, I saw Ralph Nader at the Magic Stick in Detroit, and I became an activist again, this time for the Green Party. I stopped backstage to ask how I could help out a little bit, and they offered me the statewide campaign coordinator position. I was a little intimidated by that, and in retrospect, I probably could have handled it, but at the time, I sure didn't think I could. I asked for 24 hours to think about it, and in those 24 hours, they gave Joe Saxena the job, and he did a very good job of it. I was only the Tri-County Detroit area campaign coordinator for Ralph Nader and Winona LaDuke.
Oh, gee.
It's been a long, strange trip, hasn't it? Not that this looks like a Dead concert or anything. So that's where I've been. Then after the 2000 election, the Green Party started falling apart. And I started thinking that it was time that we look for something to revitalize it and provide that same cohesive, sort of a star in the east that we could march toward. And I started looking around for a governor candidate for 2002. Actually, I started looking around for somebody else, started twisting arms and did not succeed. In April, we had a fundraising lunch with Ralph Nader, and he started twisting arms also. He's kind of hard to say no to, you know. And I thought about it for a little while, and finally, after having my arm twisted in April, I filed in August of 2001 for this office. I hesitated long and hard, and finally filed after learning that David Bonnier had voted against the CAFE standard, the Fuel Economy for Motor Vehicles Act that came up in Congress, which would, if it went through, mean that everybody burns less gasoline, everybody puts less CO2 into the air, everybody puts less money into the oil companies, and somehow he found a downside to it. Hell, I don't know what the downside is. Maybe that it would make the American car companies compete with the Japanese for building and offering better technology. I don't know, maybe he thinks that's a downside. So anyway, I filed, and suddenly, and I'll be honest with you, I filed because I thought the Green Party ought to have a governor candidate to coalesce around because it would revitalize the sagging spirits of the party. I don't know if you remember summer of 2001, but we were kind of wandering in the wilderness that year. And I didn't think I was qualified, but I figured, well, if nobody else is doing it, I will. Then I got invited to a number of candidate forums, and I mean, honestly, all of you who are not running are missing out on a lot of fun. How often do you get invited to stand up between the Attorney General on one side and the Lieutenant Governor on the other side and tell the assembled audience that they're both clueless? And now they are, which makes it easier. But you're really missing out on an opportunity here. Anyway, I attended a number of these candidate forums, started doing homework. I started studying election law, which 2 years ago you never would have convinced me that I'd ever do. Started studying all the state issues. I've had inquiries from the Helmetless Motorcycle Riders Association about my policies there. I've had inquiries from the Animal Attorney Association of Michigan, and all kinds of people you would never have expected had you been asked to outline what the governor has to respond to. But during the course of this research and during the course of appearing at these various candidate forums, I found out, much to my surprise, that I'm better qualified than half the field out there, which sort of undermined my faith in the election system and its ability to weed out people like Dick Posthumus, who quite frankly, comes across like Dan Quayle light. All of the charm, but none of that annoying intellectual depth and substance. So in addition to being able to do some good things for Michigan, to promote sustainable energy, to promote more equitable tax structure, to almost entirely do away with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, whose mission, as far as I can tell, is to give away tax money to corporations who are the funders of the big campaigns. I think it's also a good opportunity to just take the system and put your thumb in its eye. I've already pledged many times to fire the first shot against the drug war in Michigan, that I will write an executive pardon for everybody convicted of simple possession of controlled substances. Cooperation of the legislature to do that. You can do that as one sole person and not have to build a coalition of 99% opposition party members. You can just do it. Well, that ought to piss a few people off. But then suddenly they're going to find out that when you pardon 10,000 people who aren't really criminals after all, that you're no longer paying $10,000 per head to house them, and suddenly you've got $100 million in the budget that doesn't have to be spent on a useless purpose anyway. So I think we're going to find a few coalition partners after doing that. I think we need to look at equity and taxation. Right now, if you buy gasoline, you pay a higher tax than diesel fuel for the roads. Well, why are all the little people subsidizing the trucking business? I think we ought to put that on parity. I think we ought to put parity between the cigarette tax, which is currently $1.25 a pack, and the marijuana tax, which currently isn't defined at all. I think we ought to put $1.25 tax parity with tobacco on marijuana sales. Now, admittedly, there's initially going to be some difficulty collecting this tax. But the other thing it's going to do, hey, they convict, 1 minute, oh hell.
Move to extend.
They convicted Al Capone on tax evasion. So, you know, there may be some opportunities, but what it will do is tell people, first of all, look, we're missing some opportunities in collecting some taxes, and second of all, it's going to provide some legitimacy to marijuana. It's not a crime. It doesn't do a lot of harm. One of the things the current drug law does is lump all drugs into the legal drugs and the illegal drugs. And from a public health standpoint, we should not be saying that marijuana is the same as heroin or ketamine. Heroin causes tremendous addiction problems. It causes a lot of overdose problems. When was the last time you ever heard of anybody who overdosed and died on grass? It just doesn't happen. Ketamine is an animal sedative, anesthetic, which causes psychosis in humans. The FDA has banned its use in humans based on a few trials that went very badly. And today it's a recreational drug of choice. And our current attitude of lumping all the illegal drugs together tells people who are thinking about experimenting with drugs that it's all the same as grass, and there's no real reason not to. You're the timekeeper, aren't you?
Yeah. Thank you.
Get the hook.